Hi guys, it's Reagan and welcome back to another video. Today's video is going to be my monthly book haul. Now for the month of February, I feel like I've done a relatively decent job not getting too many books. That being said, I do have a book haul and unboxing for you today. I think in large part, a lot of my pre-orders for the month haven't arrived or come at the very end of the month. I anticipate March being a much larger book haul, if you know what I mean. But without further ado, let's go ahead and dive right in. The first two books I'm going to chat about are two very exciting new releases. The first is, of course, Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare, this ginormous book, and also the third and final book to the Last Hour series. I have already read and documented the entire process of reading this on my channel, and I also really love the experience of picking this book up. If you're not familiar, the Last Hour series by Cassandra Clare is set kind of in the turn of the century in London. It follows a huge cast of characters. There are dynamics, there's lots of angst, there's lots of romance, and of course there's lots of demon killing. The Last Hour series is probably my favorite so far in the Shadowhunter world. I just feel like it combines all of my favorite elements, from propriety to just great character work, which you would expect from Cassandra Clare. And I feel like the fantasy plots tend to get better and better with each new series she puts out. I loved our main characters, and Cassandra Clare just thinks of new and very creative ways to break our heart and rip people apart from each other, which just makes it so unbelievably entertaining. This came out at the beginning of this month or the end of last month, but nevertheless, I have it, I've read it, I'm excited to add it to my collection. Speaking of beautiful books, I'm excited to add to my collection. The next title I have to show off is Tress of the Emerald Sea, and boy, is this probably the most beautiful book I own on my bookshelf. This is the limited edition, leather-bound hardcover edition of this book. Full page, colored illustrations throughout this entire thing. I've already read Tress of the Emerald Sea, but this is making me want to immediately reread it because this is just such a stunning thing. Everything about this book is beautiful, from the end pages to just everything. It's clear that Brandon Sanderson and his team spent a lot of time and care creating this limited edition copy. That being said, Tress of the Emerald Sea is a new release by Brandon Sanderson. It is part of the Cosmere, but it's like a standalone story following our main character Tress. This book is very, very, very whimsical. It's also a quest-centered story as we follow Tress as she departs in hopes of trying to save someone she loves very much. It's kind of like a pirate story. There's all different types of twists and turns, but the stylization of this book is really, really charming. It's also told to us from a narrator, and they consistently break the fourth wall, which makes it very, very engaging. I loved this book. It was delightful, and I love this copy of this book. I just feel like everything about this copy is perfect. Next up, I have two packages from two different used book store purchases I made this month. This is kind of like plastic book ravioli. All right, so book one is a library copy, so I'm going to need to do some removal of this plastic covering. Nevertheless, the book is Age of Legend by Michael J. Sullivan. This, of course, is the fourth book of the Legends of the Lost Empire series, a series I truly cannot get enough of. This is also the first book to the second act of this series. I'm not even sure if this is going to be following the same characters from the first three books. I'm really curious to see structurally how these two acts are going to work together, but obviously I love this world so much. Classic and pastoral and just everything I love about fantasy. For some reason it feels cozy to me, even though it by no means is a cozy fantasy novel, but I think just the setting of this fantasy world just brings me so much joy. It's a classic human versus elf sort of setup. It's also set in an ancient landscape, and you basically see the growth of human civilization in this fantasy setting. In book one, we're introduced to the overall conflict, which is between the Frey and humans. Humans basically worship the Frey as gods until one day a human accidentally kills a Frey. So I'm curious to see where the story is going to take us next. I truly cannot wait. My next used bookstore purchase is in here, and it is a big book. This is not a small. Oh, they wrapped it up so nicely. Oh my god. Look at this. So cute. Probably the most careful book packaging I have ever received from a bookstore, from a used bookseller. I'm just like astonished. Oh my gosh, and there's more packaging. But the book I bought is The Luminaries by Eleanor Canton. Eleanor Canton has a new book actually coming out this year, which I'm really, really curious to read. But The Luminaries, which won the Man Booker Prize in 2013, has been like on my radar, on my TBR for so long. I even at one point owned this book in college, but it is a really long story, so I just never got around to it. But because I'm reading more literary fiction, I thought this would be a great re-add to my shelf, and the synopsis just really calls out to me. This is set in the mid-19th century in New Zealand, and we follow our main character who basically arrives in the gold fields of this country to basically try to make his fortune. But once he gets there, he quickly gets like wrapped up in a mystery in this small town. Basically, someone has died, someone has been accused of this murder, and a fortune has been discovered in the town drunk's home. This book is also multi-POV. I think we're drawn all over the place through so many different people's lives, so I know there's going to be lots of like literary connections, which is a device I personally always enjoy. I don't know, this is just a book that I feel like has eluded me for years, but also one I feel like I will really, really enjoy. So I decided to grab it. I found it for a great price used, which I feel like is always my go-to for any really popular, especially literary fiction release. You can always find it secondhand for like a really solid price. And apparently they're going to deliver it to you in like astonishingly careful packaging, which I just respect all around. Next up, I have some publisher mail I'm excited to show off. The first is This Time It's Real by Anna Liang. This book honestly sounds adorable. It has so many tropes that I love so much. Most of all, it's centering fake dating. This is set in an international school in Beijing, and in the story, we follow our main character, Eliza, and she basically writes an essay about meeting the love of her life, and the story goes viral. The popularity of this essay also results in her landing so many incredible opportunities, like her dream internship. But Eliza has a secret. This essay was completely made up. Has not met the love of her life, but she does love writing. To kind of cover her tracks, she basically strikes up a deal with a handsome, aloof classmate of hers who also happens to be a famous actor named Kaz. The deal is he will pretend to be this love of her life, and she will help him write his college entrance exam essays. This book just sounds so cute, and I love that it has kind of like viral buzziness to it, but I think it kind of still at the heart of it centers so many fun like contemporary tropes. It honestly just sounds like something that would put a smile on my face, so I was excited for this to appear in my mailbox. Next up, I have this package, and I don't have scissors, so I'm gonna just try to see if I can open this up with my bare hands. Ooh, I think I've done it. Really tape this up really strongly. Okay, I did it. Oh my gosh. Okay, this book was sent to me from Tor and is for sure one of my most anticipated releases of this year, and that is The Cage of Dark Hours by Marina Lostetter. This is a sequel to The Helm of Midnight, which was a fantasy book I read and loved so much when it came out. This series is also just one of my current favorite genre combinations, and that is fantasy with mystery thriller. In Helm of Midnight, we're basically introduced to a variety of characters. One is a part of a group called the Regulators. And in this fantasy world, magic basically manifests itself in like physical objects, and that magic can be imbued to people who use those objects. One of the best known examples are these things called death masks. Basically, people can infuse their knowledge, their skill into these masks, and then people can put them on and basically utilize those skills. Think like a doctor passing on his secrets of surgery, if you will. At the beginning of this book, our main character is basically working a job where they have to protect some really dangerous magical artifacts, which includes a mask to a very famous serial killer. This mask, though, is very quickly stolen, and once again, his signature killings begin to haunt the city. We also follow a few different characters that all feel very, very disconnected, but slowly, as this conspiracy begins to unwind, all the characters kind of slowly come together. It had multiple timelines. It was absolutely riveting. It was so, so dark, and I'm really curious to see like where the series is going to take off from here. Basically, by the end of the first one, you realize that there's a much larger situation at play, and I know this is going to be a trilogy, so I'm excited to see where the plot is going to take us next. I love Marina Lostetter's writing. Again, the first one was absolutely fantastic, so I am so excited to have this. The next book I picked up was 1,000 Steps into the Night by Tracy Chi. This was a National Book Award long list, and just kind of when I was reading over the synopsis, I was really curious to read this book. It's a YA fantasy story, which I don't pick up as many of those anymore, but I really feel like this would be one that I would love. And in this story, we follow our main character Miyoku, and she lives in a world where gods, monsters, demons all live alongside humans. She herself lives a rather ordinary life as the daughter of an innkeeper, and she's really not expecting anything in her life to change until one day she's touched by a demon, starting her own transformation to be turned into one. This forces our main character Miyaku to go on a quest to try to reverse this curse. Along the way, she basically meets up with a variety of different people who kind of join her on her journey, and she obviously has to overcome a variety of obstacles. I just have heard really good things about this. I also feel like its tie-in to folklore and fantasy is just a combination I always really enjoy. I've also read other books by this author, so I'm excited to pick this book up. I'm hoping I love it, and I feel like I might. Next up, I also grabbed Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This was one of my most anticipated releases of this year. Obviously, I had to add it to my shelf right away. This is like a romance mixed with fantasy, one of the best combinations if you ask me. It sounds heartwarming, adorable, and just charming, but in it we follow our main character Emily Wilde, and she is like one of the foremost experts in Fae, and at the beginning of this book, she's basically working on her next dissertation, kind of studying a new area, a new town that she feels like could be directly connected with the Fae themselves. So she's traveling there, kind of settling in to begin this work. Unfortunately though, one of her co-workers, who is annoyingly charming, just happens to appear also in this town and begins to very quickly win over all the townspeople. They also sort of begin to work together a bit, but Emily begins to draw closer to finding out the answer to the Fae, and lo and behold, it might very well tie back into her very annoying co-worker. Again, this just sounds so cute. I love any type of rom-com story with a dash of fantasy, particularly when it has to do with the Fae. I feel like this is going to be really cute and a lot of fun, so obviously I had to add it to my shelf. It's also beautiful, like there's no dust jacket. This is just a stunning hardcover, and I'm here for it. It's so adorable. Next, I had a gift card. So I decided to finally buy like the first book to a fantasy series I've had my eye on for a long time. And it's a big book. Like this is definitely a chunky series, but I really feel like it's gonna be one that I'm going to enjoy. And that is The Shadow of What Was Lost by James Islington. This is the first book to the Lycanus trilogy, which kind of gives me like Roman Empire vibes if I had to guess. And this is a multi-POV fantasy story set in an empire that just 20 years prior overthrew the previous rulers, who were the godlike augurs. But those who once served them, called the Gifted, were spared only after accepting the rebellion's 4 tenets, vastly limited their powers. Davian, one of our main characters, suffers the consequences of this war that occurred before he was born, but at the beginning of the story, he also discovers that he wields the power of the now dead augurs, obviously setting in motion a chain of events that is now unstoppable. Far away from Davian, another young man wakes up in a forest covered in blood. No memory who he is, but it says that his fate will soon be entwined with our main character. I'm really curious about this. I've heard excellent things about it. I also feel like it's just recently wrapped up, so I feel like it could be a good series to start and maybe finish soon. I also will say I love these covers, and these paperbacks are so well made. Personally speaking, I think Orbit just makes a great paperback, you know? Big fan. 10 out of 10. And then the last few books I'm going to show off are from Book of the Month. I grabbed 2 books from them this month. One was like an add-on title that came out a little while ago that I just wanted to add to my shelf, and the other is a new release. That new release is The Last Tale of the Flower Bride by Roshni Chakshi. I'm really excited to add this book to my shelves for so many different reasons. First, it is this author's debut adult work. I really enjoy Roshni's writing, especially her middle grade series. I find that she writes great characters, wonderful banter, so I'm excited to see how that's going to translate into an adult story. On top of that, this is a gothic fantasy story about a marriage that is unraveled by dark secrets, a friendship cursed to end in tragedy, and the danger of believing in fairy tales. Dark, gothic, fairy tales, a troubled marriage. I mean, what else could even be said to convince me to read this book. I love all of those things. And the synopsis of this book goes, once upon a time, a man who believes in fairy tales married a very mysterious woman named Indigo. They fell in love. They were very, very happy in their marriage. Indigo herself had one rule before she accepted her new bridegroom, and that is he was never to pry into her past. Unfortunately, though, at the beginning of this book, after Indigo hears that her aunt is dying, they have to move back to her family home, which is called the House of Dreams. There, the bridegroom is kind of unable to resist kind of digging into Indigo's past, especially when her best friend kind of enters the fold. The house begins to reveal secrets and things very quickly begin to get complicated. I love the sound of this. It sounds weird and atmospheric. It's also described to be in the same vein as a lot of my favorite books. I hope it's romantic and dark and chilling. I really feel like I'm going to love this. And then lastly, the last book I grabbed this month is Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. This is another very, very atmospheric story, and for some reason like escaped me purchasing it when it came out last year. I really had my eye on this book and I just completely forgot to buy it. So I'm happy to have it now in my hands. But this is said to be a deeply atmospheric story about ancestral magic and unsolved murder and second chance at true love. And in this story, we follow our main character, Emery. And Emery's life was turned upside down when she was young, when her best friend was murdered and the love of her life, August, was accused of doing so. Fast forward many years later, Emery is doing the one thing that she swore she never would, which is to run her family small business, which is a tea shop on the very island in which Emery grew up. This island is steeped in folklore and kind of magic and atmosphere and all of those things. One day she wakes up to discover that every single tree on the island has turned its leaves overnight, and she takes this as an obvious sign of an omen. And she's correct, because August shows up on the shores of this very island once again, and I think the elements around the murder begin to be brought into the light once more. I'm very curious about this. I feel like it's going to combine like elements of magic, small town politics, and also, as it hints in the synopsis, like first love, and so possibly a romance. I just feel like it seems like an interesting mix of things, and I've heard great things, and I also feel like I'm going to love this book. Alrighty guys, that is my February book haul. Let me know down below some books you've gotten recently, as I would love to know, and I will see you soon with another video soon. Goodbye!